everyone, so by the way, I'm Lagura. My course is BS in Math. So now, I'm the first reporter about the Pavlov's classical conditioning. Conditioning introduction. Conditioning and behavioral psychology is a theory that the reaction responds to an object or event, a stimulus by a person or animal can be modified by learning or conditioning. If we talk about the conditioning and behavioral psychology, conditioned behaviors are types of associated learning where a stimulus becomes associated with a consequence. A stimulus response or S-R theories are central to the principles of conditioning. They are based on the assumption that human behavior is learned. So, a stimulus response theory is a concept in psychology that refers to the belief that behaviors manifest as a result of the interplay between a stimulus and response. In other words, behaviors cannot exist without a stimulus of some sort, at least from this perspective. Stimulus provided by instructor, to response by learner, to reinforcement provided by instructor. So this is learning is behavior change. So stimulus, a thing or event that evokes a specific reaction in an organ. So a stimulus is anything that can trigger a physical or behavioral change. Response, a reaction as that of an organism or a mechanism to a specific stimulus. So response is a change in the organism resulting from the detection of a stimulus. Three major types of learning or conditioning. First is learning through association, or this is the classical conditioning. Second, learning through consequence, so operant conditioning. Third, learning through observation, modeling or observational learning. What is classical conditioning? So there have two definitions. First is classical conditioning is a learning process that occurs through association between an environmental stimulus and a naturally occurs stimulus. Second definition is it had a major influence on behaviorism, which is based on the assumption that learning occurs through interaction with the environment. So the classical conditioning requires placing a neutral stimulus immediately before a stimulus that automatically occurs, which eventually leads to learned response to the formerly neutral stimulus. In Pavlov's experiments, he presented food to a dog while shining a light in a dark room or ringing a bell. And now, we talk about Ivan Pavlov. So, he born on September 26, 1849. Then he was awarded the degree of Candidate of Natural Sciences in 1875, and he was awarded the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine 1904 in recognition of his work on the physiology of digestion. And he died on February 27, 1936.
Hi, my name is Niko Ladroma, BS in Math, and we are currently discussing about the Pavlov's classical condition. In Pavlov's classical condition, there are four components. Number one, let's start for number one. The number one is the unconditioned stimulus, which stands for UC is. UC is or the unconditioned stimulus is the stimulus that normally or automatically trigger a response. Second, the unconditional response which stands for UCR. The unlearned response that occur normally or in response to the unconditioned stimulus. Isa ko nun sa unresponse that occur normally in response to the unconditioned response or stimulus. The third component is the conditioned stimulus, which is stand for CS. The conditioned stimulus is a previous normal stimulus that when paired with a conditioned stimulus trigger to a conditioned response. Again, the conditioned stimulus will stand for CS is a previous normal stimulus that when paired with a conditioned stimulus trigger to a conditioned response. Last component of classical conditioning is the conditioned response, which stands for CR. It is a learned response to the previously neutral stimulus. Again, it is a learned response to the previously neutral stimulus. There are the four components of classical conditioning. The first one is the conditioning stimulus, stand for UCS, and the second one is the conditional response, which stand for UCR, and the third is the conditional stimulus, which stand for CS, and the last one is the conditional response, which stand for CR. According to Ivan Pavlov's classical conditioning, unconditioned stimulus to unconditioned response. Again, unconditioned stimulus to unconditioned response. And when we add the unconditioned stimulus and also the neutral stimulus will become a conditioned stimulus. And the conditioned stimulus into conditioned response. Again, conditioned stimulus na when it is the result together the unconditioned stimulus and the neutral stimulus, which is the result of conditioned stimulus and to conditioned response. There are 5 principles of classical condition by Ivan Pavlov. Number 1 is acquisition. Acquisition means it is the essential stage of learning when a response is first established and gradually strengthened. During the acquisition phase of classical condition, a neutral stimulus is repeatedly paired with an unconditioned stimulus. The example of this is, imagine that you are conditioning a dog to salivate or respond to sounds of bell. Then, you repeatedly pair or presentation of food and the sounds of the bell. You can say the response has been acquired and soon the dog begins to salvation its response to the bell tone. One response has been established, you can gradually reinforce a salvation response to make sure that behavior is well learned. The second principle of classical condition is extinction, which means when you occurrence or conditioning response decrease or disappear. In classical conditioning, this happens when conditioned stimulus is no longer paired with a conditioned stimulus. For example, if the smell of food, the conditioning stimulus, has been paired with the sounds of whistle or bell, and the conditioned stimulus, it would be eventually come to evoke and condition. The third one is the spontaneous recovery. Something's a learned response can suddenly reemerge or even after a period of extinction. Spontaneous recovery. It is a reappearance of conditioned response after a rest period of less response. For example, is when you imagine that after training a dog to salivate the sounds of the bell or the whistle, you can stop reinforcing a behavior and the response eventually become instinct after a rest period during which is conditioned stimulus. With the conditioned stimulus is not presented or suddenly ring the bell, and the animals is spontaneously recover a previously learned response. If the conditioned stimulus and conditioned stimulus are no longer associated, extinction will occur repeatedly after spontaneous recovery. That is an that is an spontaneous recovery. That is a spontaneous recovery means. Fourth principle is generalizations. Stimulus generalization is the tendency of conditioning stimulus to evoke similar response after the response has been conditioned. For example, if a dog has been conditioned to salivate, and the sounds of the bell and the animals may also exhibit in the same response to stimuli that are similar or conditioned stimulus. And the other example is a small child was conditioned to pair a white rat and then the child demonstrates stimulus generously by also exhibiting fear in response of the other frizzy white object, including stuffed toy and was them on. Last principle is discrimination or stimulus discrimination. The stimulus discrimination is the ability to differentiate between the conditioned stimulus and the other stimuli that have not been paired with the unconditioned stimulus. For example, if a bell tone were the conditioned stimulus, discrimination would involve being able to tell the difference between the bell tone and the other similar sound, because the object is able to distinguish between the stimuli they will only respond the conditioned stimulus is presented. According to the experiment of Pavlov's classical condition, the first is, which is the before conditioning. The first part of classical conditioning process requires a naturally occurring stimulus that will automatically elate a response. Celebrating a response to the smell of food is a good example of natural occurring stimulus. During this phase of processes, the unconditioned stimulus, which is UCR, result in unconditioned response. UCR, for example, representing food. The UCS is natural and automatically trigger a salvation response. The second one, which is the during conditioning. During the second phase of classical conditioning process, the previously neutral stimulus is repeatedly paired with the unconditioned stimulus. As a result of this pairing and association between the previously neutral stimulus and the UCS is formed. The last one, which is the after conditioning. As you can see the dog there. Once the association has been made between the UCS and the CEs presented, the conditioned stimulus alone will come to evoke a response even without the unconditioned stimulus. The resulting response is known as a conditioned response, which is stand for CR. The conditioned response is the learning response that previously neutral stimulus. In our example, that continued response would be feeling angry with hear and sounds of the whistle. Type of conditioning. Forward conditioning is occur when the natural stimulus, which is NS, appear just before and during the presentation of the unconditioned stimulus, UCH. There are two types. Number 1, delay conditioning forward. The CS is presented before the US and the CS stay until the US is presented. This is generally the best, specifically when the delay is short. Second, trace conditioning. Discrete event the presented, then the US occur shorter than interval the better, but you can tell this approach into every effective. And the backward conditioning. The backward conditioning occur when a conditioned stimulus immediately follow an unconditioned stimulus.
Hello, good day. I am Etang, the next reporter. Behavioral therapy. When we say behavioral therapy, it is an umbrella term for types of therapy that treat mental health disorders. These forms of therapy seeks to identify and help change potentially self-destructive or unhealthy behaviors. Flooding. prolonged exposure theory used for the treatment of phobias and anxiety disorders. It works by exposing the patients their painful memories with the goal of reintegrating their repressed emotions with current awareness. Aversion therapy. It is a behavior therapy. Oversized stimuli is paired with harmful or society undesirable behavior until the behavior becomes associated with the pain of discomfort. When we say aversion therapy, it is a type of behavioral treatment interventions that is used to design to make a patient give up and an undesirable habit by causing them to associate it with unpleasant effects. It also helps a person to give up behavior or habit by having them associated it with something unpleasant. Systematic desensitization, an evidence therapy approach that combines relaxation techniques with gradual exposure to help you slowly overcome a phobia. It includes identify anxiety, copying relaxation strategy, and habituated to situation. Some practical application of classical conditioning exercise. Close your eyes and thinking about your favorite food. Okay, close your eyes and think about your favorite food. Now, now you can open your eyes. Let's look at the picture. As you can see, we have here delicious foods. Delicious foods, some burgers, barbecues. Is your mouth watering? If yes, it is because you are conditioned. You are accompanied increase of salivation, aversion to eating certain foods, and excessive swallowing. Conclusion. Although Pavlov disliked psychology, his work remains one of the most important in psychological history. According to Pavlov, conditioned reflexes were temporary or unstable, and he himself expressed that it is not an ideal educational theory. Classical conditioning is actually not a change in the behavioral but a similar response to a different stimulus. Classical conditioning is ineffective for a classroom purposes.